Thanks. Okay. Well, thank you very much, Aditya, and it's a pleasure to be back at Purdue. It's not the first time I've been back since I graduated, which was in 1974, but it's the first time I've been back since Lawson Hall opened, and it's one heck of a building. Congratulations on the people who had the foresight to design a lot of great things here. I'm sure those of you who are on the inside know what you wish you would have done that you didn't, but as an outsider coming in and comparing it with what I know exists at Ohio State, what I've seen exist at many other places, you did a lot of things right. And I really admire the opportunities for collaborative activities that you've built into the building, the laboratory environments that you have here, and the open space that you have for just informal activities for the students and visitors that you have to the building. The building is still pretty brand new, so you're probably still enjoying it. I remember when I was department chair, when I first became department chair at Ohio State in 1994 was when our building opened up. And it was a great occasion, and it really did boost, I said in 1994 the morale of the department took a great turn for the better, and it wasn't because I became department chair. It was because we had this brand new space, and it was exciting new space, and people felt really good about moving into the new digs, and I hope that you're still experiencing the same thing, because it did last for a while at Ohio State. Now we're probably pretty comfortable and, you know, looking for more space, just as everybody's always looking for more space, but that's the way things work. So let's see, a little bit about my background. I came to Purdue in 1968. I had done my undergraduate work in New York at City University of New York City College, CUNY City College. I was a mathematics major, and at the time I was a mathematics major at City. There was no computing department over there. So computer science in the 60s did not exist as a formal academic department in most places. Now, of course, Purdue is an exception to that, but Purdue was, we always say, the first computer science department, right? And if there are no Stanford people in the audience, I think we can get away with that. But if you go to Stanford, they'd probably challenge that. Both departments formed in 1962, but I still consider Purdue was the first one. And, but we didn't have any over there, so I was taking math courses, and it was a basic mathematics degree, pure mathematics, okay? So, yeah, okay, so I did all right there, but I took as many of the applied courses as I could while I was over there, and that meant that I took statistical type courses. I took an economics course that used both statistical methods as well as computing. I learned my first computer programming language in a course that was called engineering something or other. And it taught MAD. Anybody know what MAD is? Okay, the MAD programming language, MAD, M-A-D, and it stood for Michigan Algorithmic Decoder. Okay, it was a dialect of Fortran. That was my first programming language. So I learned a little bit of programming, and I used it in this economics course and in one other course. And I knew at the time that I did not want to be a mathematician as a career. That sort of was not what I wanted to do. I wanted to see how mathematics can be applied in some more useful way. And actually work on problems that were more of an applied nature. So I had learned a little statistics, but just dabbled in it, you know, because statistics wasn't my major, and there was only like a math stat course or two that I was able to take in a psych stat course in this economics class. And I learned a little computing for whatever that was worth at City College at the time. And I didn't know very much about either of the fields. So when I was applying for graduate school, I was looking for an opportunity to go to a place that allowed me to apply mathematics in an interesting way. Purdue offered a very unique program in 1968. It was a joint master's degree in statistics and computer science. And I applied for that program. I said, I don't know that much about either of these areas, but they're both very intriguing based on what I'd learned about them in the little bit of education I'd had. And I really wanted to learn more about these fields. And I had a chance to learn about both of them in this program. So I got accepted, got an assistantship, and came to Purdue. That's how I got here in 1968. And in going into that program, I was probably about the second person to be in that program, and I doubt that it even exists anymore. But whatever it was, I got accepted into the statistics department. I had to be in one or the other of the departments. So I was in statistics, and we were on the 5th floor of the Math Sciences building. That's where my office was and where the statistics department at least was located then. I don't know where it is today. But, and computer science was on the 4th floor of the Math Sciences building in those days. I took about half of my courses in statistics and about half of my courses in computer science. And then it came time for me to kind of make a choice as to what I was going to do. And the opportunities that I had were kind of interesting. So I was serving as a TA for calculus, and I had taught another math course, so I did a little bit of teaching, and I said, you know, this is good. I do want to go on for a doctoral degree and look for some type of a faculty position. But the statistics faculty member with whom I was working at the time, his name was Virgil Anderson, a very well-known person in the area of statistical experimental design. And he wanted me to continue to work for him, but he also required me to study chemistry to work on some kind of problem. And the kind of chemistry that he needed for me to learn was actually going to take me the better part of 2 years to get. And I really was less interested in making that kind of an investment at that particular time, just to be able to go on for the degree. So I had more of a propensity for computer science, and so I asked Sam Conte to transfer into computer science. And so Sam, who was chair of the department at the time, was very amenable to have me transfer into computer science, and I had a great grade point average. In fact, I think I had an all-A average or something like that. But the problem was he wouldn't offer me support. So I guess that grades were not what mattered at that point. But the reason was I applied too late in the year. And there was sort of this hard and fast rule that said that, you know, if you haven't applied by this time, you can't get it because all the support's committed. And rats. So I was faced with this problem of going for 2 years in chemistry and staying in the statistics department, or coming over to computer science and not being able to eat, neither of which were very appealing to me. Well, Maury Halstead came to my rescue and offered me a research associateship. And when he found out that there was no TA at the inn, and he gave me an RA and asked me to continue working for him. And he was developing this new field of software metrics, some interesting stuff in the metrics area. And that's how I got into the CS department. So it's a kind of an interesting, got to be in the right place at the right time type thing. And sometimes it's good to have made good contacts with faculty, with a variety of faculty members, so that your opportunity space is maximized for being able to cope with adversity along the way. And that both of those things actually happened to me at the time that I was at Purdue. So this episode with Sam Conte was actually my first interaction with Sam as department head, since I had been in statistics and I'd been taking courses with some computer science professors, but didn't have him as a professor. But the first time I actually needed him, he came to me and said he can't give me support. So that was Conte episode 1. All right. So I went and pursued my education here, did my degree. One of the nice things about got married also. That was a very important activity during that time. That was just as I finished my master's in '71 and moved to the CS department. And so I got married then, and we lived over in married student housing down the ways there. Probably still exists, although I didn't go over there to see if the facility that we lived in is still there. But it was on Arnold Drive, right? So I suppose you know where that is. Then got finished with a degree. The nice thing about having my name starting with a ZW is when you graduate, or at least in those days, when you graduated at commencement and all of the doctoral students are individually recognized at commencement. But you were asked to hold your applause until all of the students have been named. So I was the only PhD who got applause at commencement. So that was a memorable occasion. But the other memorable thing that happened to me at the end of the career as a doctoral student was Conte episode 2. At the final oral, there's a public event, right? Anybody can come in and attend the examination, not just the people on your committee. And it was pretty traditional for fellow graduate students, especially those who were in your research group or in your research area, to be at an exam to watch you sweat because they were going to have to someday themselves, and they wanted to kind of see what those things were like. So I had my committee, and I had a few of the graduate students, the normal cast of characters that you would expect, and then in walks Sam Conte, who was not a member of my committee, into the examining meeting. And I'm giving my presentation and being interrupted countless times, a few times by members of my committee, but most of the time by Sam Conte. And I said, what the hell is going on? And so this is kind of unnerving me just a little bit. I try to keep composed and all and answer the questions as best I can. And I found out afterwards that the reason I was being grilled the way I was by Sam is because he was interested in getting into this area. And as you may know, was eventually the co-author of a very valuable and important book in the metrics area, along with Buster Dunsmore and Vincent Shen later on. And I didn't know that at the time because he and I did not interact during the development of my thesis, but and Maury didn't prepare me for this at all, you know. So and so he had been talking with Maury about things, but I didn't know that. And to have the head of the department come in and grill you at your exam when this person is not a member of the committee is an interesting event. So let me put it that way, students who are in the audience. But so that was Conte episode 2, and but it turned out to be the beginning of a nice relationship that I had with Sam over the years because we then were able to interact in other ways and talk about common research interests as we were going forward. So as Aditya pointed out, I did end up going to Ohio State and working in the area of software metrics. It was nice to be looking into a field that was new, and you can have more impact in a field that's new than you might otherwise, because there's a lot of low-hanging fruit, and there's a lot of things that are just totally unexplored that you can go in and look at. But one of the drawbacks of working in a new field is that the research paradigm is often not very well developed and may be actually quite poor. And this is what happened in software engineering, and certainly in the early days of software metrics. We had a very poor research paradigm. We had, as one of the students was characterizing it at lunch today, and I really had a great meeting with a number of the students at lunch, as it was basically religious wars. And people would publish papers about their technique or their approach, and it was because they thought it was a good idea that it got published. And if their name was prominent, it was a lot easier for it to get published. But that was the main basis on which it was published. No analytic support for the activity, no empirical support. It was just a matter of religious wars, and this was just unacceptable to me. There's one thing I did learn from my fellow colleagues and faculty here is about what constitutes an appropriate research paradigm, both in statistics and computer science, and I knew that ain't it. So it was one of the nice things I was able to do, and I did this both as a researcher as well as ultimately as a member of the editorial board of the Transactions on Software Engineering, is to try to slow down or stop that kind of publication. But then it was a matter of, okay, so you can't prove a lot of theorems about how people write programs, which is one of the areas that I was working in. But there's a lot of behavioral stuff, and empirical studies were fine. But there weren't a lot of people in the computing field who knew what empirical studies looked like and how to do them well. So that was another way in which we needed to fix the field, is to try to help them to understand how to do good empirical studies, what good experimental design was like, what good control techniques were, and what appropriate statistical analysis methods were. And my background from Purdue that melded statistics and computer science made me not necessarily uniquely suited for it, but well suited to that particular task. So that's another place in which the particular background that I actually got here at Purdue and the people that I had interacted with over here made it possible for me to work successfully in research, and I actually picked a nice balance of statistics and computer science to move me forward in my research career. Another thing that Purdue showed me while I was here, there were a number of great examples of faculty who had done interesting and extensive amount of service activities in their professional organizations. Maury Halstead did a little bit in SIGPlan, but not so much. There were a lot of other examples. Sam Conte himself, who was one of the early leaders of what eventually became the Computing Research Association. He was one of the leaders of what at that time was called the Computer Science Board. And Paul Young, who was another faculty member here at Purdue at the time, was another person who was active in that group and eventually did become the leader of the computing, what is now the CRA. Peter Denning, who was also on the faculty here at Purdue at the time, was very active in ACM in different ways and eventually became one of ACM's presidents. So there were a lot of role models floating around the Purdue faculty of having an impact beyond the educational area in which you're working, beyond the research area in which you're working. And it showed me the ability of being able to have impact in a number of ways, and that service mattered also. And that I actually pursued that in different ways in my own right, and it was nice because I also had a couple of colleagues on the Ohio State faculty at the time who were involved in the local ACM leadership in the Central Ohio chapter, and so I eventually got involved there and made connections in the Central ACM. That led me to become chair of what was called ACM's Chapters Board, which gave me an opportunity to interact with chapters worldwide, and I really appreciated the fact of the chapters community being both a worldwide community and also a community that connected with industry. There were student chapters, but then there were the professional chapters in the different places. They don't exist in the same way today. They're not nearly as strong as they were back in the 70s and 80s, but in those days they were a very big, important connection point, and they really helped me to get connected with the industry in Central Ohio in a way that served me well later on, both in terms of supporting some research that I did, and later as department chair in terms of being able to connect with them in things that were of interest to the department and providing support to them. So being able to take advantage of those opportunities was very helpful. And I eventually was fortunate enough to get, the other person who was on the faculty who was active at a more national level was the founding chair at Ohio State, Marshall Yavitz. Marshall was another one, along with Sam Conte, who was one of the leaders of the Computer Science Board. and also was this region's regional representative to the ACM Council. Ohio and Indiana were in the same region, and he was the representative to the ACM Council when the council was structured in the way it was then. So I actually eventually ran for that office and got elected, and then got into the more global sphere of the ACM activities. And when I became, eventually was fortunate enough to become elected president of ACM after having served as vice president for a couple of years. And the activities that we did, some of the things that I wanted to do in my ACM days were, number one, change the financial model of ACM so that it was less dependent on the publications revenue, because the whole nature of how publications were working was changing, so that we were changing the model of how income got generated. And we needed to launch a publication vehicle that was more conducive to the times, which was eventually became ACM's digital library. And the digital library was not quite rolled out during my presidency. It actually got rolled out 2 or 3 months into Chuck House's presidency, who followed me, but that was fine. We did a lot of good work on that, and that was one thing that got moved up in priorities. Another one was making ACM's global connection. ACM was always an international organization, but it was really the A in ACM to anybody outside of the United States and possibly Canada meant American and not association. So one of the tasks that we had, and that I had, was to expand ACM's global outreach, and we did that by actually having meetings in Asia of the leadership of the ACM the ACM Executive Committee. We had done that in the previous administration in Central Europe, and then carried it out into the Asian community and established some relationships with China that eventually grew into some more productive activities that involved some co-hosting of ACM's publication server stuff in the Asian community. A third thing that happened during our administration was the first of the chess matches between Garry Kasparov and IBM, Deep Blue. The one that was in 1996, the last year of my presidency, was the one that Kasparov won, not the one that the media plays up. That was the next year, in 1997, when Deep Blue beat him. But it was really great to see how an expert really works. And I was telling the students that we were talking about software engineering, and somebody had brought up the fact that when Fred Brooks would say that there's this enormous difference in the capabilities of programmers. Not all programmers are created equally. And the same is true of experts in most fields, that their just ability to do things is just in a totally different level than mere mortals, even other masters of the chess community, as I learned during my term in watching Kasparov play, and some of the aftermath of the matches that he had with the computer as he was replaying them with his colleagues and talking to them just the way I'm talking to you, and with his hands moving the chess pieces on the board, just the way I'm doing right now. Not just to replay the game, but to show all the alternative moves that he was thinking at the time. And the ability of him to be able to process information in the way that he does was revealed in some ways that, not that I'm a chess aficionado. I know the rules of the game, but I can't play it real well. But I could really appreciate somebody who can. And this was just a really beautiful experience. Another thing that I was kind of proud of at the time is that this was the period when ACM launched its public policy initiative, what is now called the USACM, and ably led by your own SPAF. This was an activity that got launched just as my presidency was beginning. And I'm glad to say that it has taken off and become what we had hoped it would be, which was something that really has an impact on policy activities and gives the computing community respect and a voice in things that it deserves a voice in, because public policy activities in many cases have computing interests that underlie them in computing. If you don't take into account the computing ramifications of them, you're going to make very bad policy decisions. So we have a place at the table, we deserve a place at the table, and we need to have a place at the table if we're going to affect good policies. And so I'm glad to see that that's happening both within ACM and within the Computing Research Association as it went. One of the nice mistakes that I made was becoming ACM president in 1994, and if you heard Aditya's introduction, you will observe that that is precisely the year that I became department chair at Ohio State. That was an interesting activity. It was one of these things of take advantage of opportunities when they come, but don't be stupid about it. And the first couple of months, they were offset by a period of exactly 3 months. My presidency started July 1st. My term, well, actually it was more like 2 months, because my term as department chair actually started right after Labor Day, although officially it started at the end of September when our building opened, which was right after Labor Day, and the heating system was working just fine, except that it was 90 degrees out. It's the heating system. That's the HVAC system was working great on the heating side. But I managed to muddle through it, and I learned the value of good staff, because there was no way I could get the department up and running without good staff, valuing what they can do and letting them do it, and letting faculty do the things that they need to do. And one of the things that I tried to do as department chair is to allow people to be as good as they can be in the areas that they tended to excel in. And not every faculty member excels in the same area. We like to think that all of our faculty are great researchers. That's the thing that probably has the most impact on the reputation of the department. And so we want to make sure that that's strong, for sure. Teaching is also quite important. We need to make sure our students are educated. After all, those are the people who largely are paying our salaries. And at the same time, not everybody is good at both. And there's also work to be done to make the department function properly that is not to be ignored, because otherwise bad things happen. And if you put the wrong people in charge of committees, key committees, people who either don't have the skills to do it or don't want to do it, then you end up doing it twice. And that isn't any good for the department. So learning a little bit about how to do that was interesting. Having had the experience of leading ACM and working with great staff over there was very helpful, actually, and being around a lot of other people who actually came from industry and had managerial experience of their own that I kind of assimilated some of by osmosis, and just being around was kind of nice. So those things were helpful to me. I'm glad to say that the reason I was chair for 11 years, because I served 2 4-year terms. Okay, you say, didn't they teach you how to count at Purdue? And it was a combination of a few things that caused each of my terms to be extended. Some had to do with dean changes, because during the 11 years there were actually 4 deans that I served under. And so that was another interesting activity. Every time there's a change at the top, you have to reorient yourself with a new personality and figure out how to get along with that person effectively. And each one was different. So, as you might expect, because every department head is also different, and you just kind of learn how to do that. But it was a challenge. It was especially challenging, and some ways fun, and of course in some ways not so much. But any job is like that, because of the roller coaster ride that computing was on during that period. 1994 was more or less the beginning of the internet revolution. And it was really in the late 90s that it reached its peak, and it was at that period that computing enrollments doubled in a 2-year period. 40% growth in 97, another 40% growth in 98. And of course, that's not sustainable, but it sure had an impact on the way we were doing business. And it not only had an impact in terms of the number of people we were trying to serve, but it had an impact on our ability to keep people that we wanted to keep, like good students, both undergraduate and graduate, and good faculty, because all of the above were being scarfed up by industry, And our good faculty were not only trying to be scarfed up by industry, but they were trying to be scarfed up by the Purdues and other competitors of Ohio State of the world. And in order to just stay in place, you had to kind of do the same kind of thing, right? The same rating. So there was a lot of churning going on in the field in those days. And that was the 90s. And then the crash happened after 2000. And the roller coaster ride had hit its peak and started down, and the enrollments went down considerably. So I actually got to be chair in both sides of that roller coaster, and it was really interesting coping. It was very different. Got to learn a little bit about the dynamics of what happens during both of those phases of a cycle, because I lived through them and got to understand a little bit about how they behave, about how to predict what might happen, and there were good reasons why the things that happen. Sometimes you understand them a little better after they happen. Sometimes you can try to tell people what's going to happen, but they don't believe you. You know, like I was trying to tell students when the job market was real tough at the beginning of the dot-com crash, that there was a good reason why it was tough and it would be a temporary thing until the market sorted itself out, but that since computing was such a great field, by the time high school students whom I would meet every couple of times a year, prospective students, and say, by the time you're going to graduate, that will have all sorted itself out. And if you believe computing's a good field, there'll still be jobs and you know, fine jobs out there for you. And sure enough, that's what happened, but it was a real hard sell in 2001, 2002, and even in 2003 at the time. So, but now computing enrollments are stabilized and actually on the rise again. So at the undergraduate level, and for those of you who haven't read the article, the short article that I have on the Talby survey that's actually on the CRA website is about the undergraduate part of things. The full article will come out in May, but the enrollments are up and the Talby data actually now show that. So this is good news, and we're not going to, don't expect us to go back to the internet days, but that was a chaotic time and a not sustainable level anyway. But we are in good shape. So, I got to live a little bit of that, and then I got into accreditation, which is the other area of service that I've tried to make an impact in. In the days that I was on the ACM Council, when the Computing Sciences Accreditation Board came up for a vote of whether ACM should be a society that belonged to this organization, and the vote was something, there were 25 members on the council, the vote was something like 18-3 and a couple of abstentions. I was one of the 3. And of course I ended up becoming president of the organization after that, But that was because Adele Goldberg appointed me to be an alternate director to CSAB. And the reason I voted no was because I didn't see industry's support for accreditation being what I thought it needed to be for an accreditation activity to be what it really needed to be. And even to this day, the industry activity in accreditation in computing is not as prominent as it is in other areas in which accreditation exists, such as engineering. You don't have to have graduated from an accredited program in order to get a good job at a good company in the computing field. Whereas in engineering, it is a barrier to both entrance into the field and advancement into the field. There are a few selected exceptions in accreditation in computing, but they're more isolated. And that was the reason I voted against it at the time. But once the decision was made to participate as an educator, as a person who was interested in quality assurance because of my work in software engineering, I said, if this is going to be what we're going to do, we've got to do it right. And so I tried to get involved to try to make it be right, worked on changing the criteria, and now have been active in what CSAT, what the accreditation body has become, which is the Computing Accreditation Commission of ABET, which is also accredits engineering and applied science and technology programs. So that's sort of a, a sketch of where I've been. And basically my goal, as the title of the thing suggests, is to try to have an impact in all the things that I did. There are different ways in which you can have an impact, whether it be in education, whether it be in research, but also in service. And there are great opportunities to do that in service. They count too. You've got to find the right things that that are important and helpful to the community. But I've been fortunate enough to find a few of them and work with a lot of great people to do that, including the people in the Computing Research Association when I got involved with that, and working on the Talby survey. I got appointed by ACM as one of ACM's 2 representatives to the CRA, and the following year, the ACM had to make a second appointment because the person who was the former ACM rep was stepping down, and they asked me, whom should I appoint? And I didn't hesitate to recommend Spaff, and Spaff's still serving that role, and I'm really glad I did. So congratulations to him, and congratulations to all of the people at Purdue who helped me to be whatever I have become, because they had a great part of it. Thanks very much.